Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and before today's video I'm just going to make a quick announcement, and that is that I've got a Facebook group up and running. You should be able to click the link in the description below or just type the channel name into Facebook and you should find the Facebook group. Please check that out if you want to be part of the best community on YouTube. Right, now onto the video. So today I'm going to talk about the slightly controversial issue, I think, of three nacelle design ships, or tri-nacelle ships, because, it's one I've been thinking of for a while, but I was inspired to do it because Resurrected Starships did a video on the design rules, so I thought I'll join in with that and sort of give a reply. So yes, let's cover that. So you have these Gene Roddenberry Starship design rules, and the first one is that the nacelles must be in pairs, and the idea of that is that you create by the interaction between the two, you create the warp field. Thing is, with a lot of these Gene Roddenberry design rules, they get broken even within the show's own canon, and not necessarily just with background ships, or kit bashes or whatever, your background ships or your wreckage, ships. Mainline ships like the Klingon Bird of Prey and the Defiant flagrantly break those rules. So I think the thing to bear in mind with these design rules is they existed, and I'm sure the reason Gene Roddenberry came up with them is to give Star Trek a specific look and to give it ships that made sense, that had substance to their style, that their form was informed by function. That is the idea. So you come up with these rules for this fictional science so that you can then have kind of a logical coherence behind it. Then what happens? But then people are going to play with that. People are going to be more unorthodox with it. So the idea of the warp nacelles being in pairs is that you use that to create a warp field between the two. There was actually some concept art for Star Trek: The Motion Picture where they were actually going to show the field, in between like a glow, but there's too much special effects, I guess, in what was already quite a psychedelic movie. But the first thing in really addressing three nacelle designs is single nacelle designs. Now I won't address that much because it's, I think, more readily accepted, and they're less interesting anyway. Essentially, you put a smaller set of warp coils with it. So yeah, you have actually two pairs of warp coils, because remember, warp coils themselves come in pairs. So you have two pairs of warp coils inside one nacelle, and so the energy, the warp field, is generated within the nacelle, and that's how that works. Now, when it comes to a three nacelle design, you are still operating in pairs, because this is my fundamental conviction with a three nacelle design is if you're going to do it, you have to design it as a three nacelle ship. You cannot just stick another nacelle on a ship and say it's a three nacelle ship design. So I'm sorry to fans of the Galaxy X or the Trek Yard's Dreadnought. Those are horrible uses of the third nacelle. That just is not correct at all. A better design is the Niagara, but that's really by chance, and it's close but not quite. I'll get to the Niagara in more detail in a second. The ship that absolutely nails what a three nacelle design should be is the Wasp class by Starfleet Museum by Masao Okazaki. So this is meant to be like a early 23rd, early Federation design, and it's basically based off the Daedalus hull, and you've got three nacelles going around, equally spaced around the central orb in the center, central sphere. I really like this design, and actually when I came across it I was really tempted to include it in the Romulan Earth War. I had enough Federation human ships anyway, so unfortunately I wasn't able to. But I really like the design, and the reason I like it is because it does the 3 nacelles extremely well. Because if you look at it, they are evenly spaced around around the hull, so they all have line of sight of each other. They can all actually see each other, and so what you actually get is 3 warp fields meeting. Because what you then do is, well, I mean, there's 2 ways. Either you could say that the warp coils project in both directions, so that you get an overlap on both sides, so that instead of it forming a pair with just one nacelle, it forms a pair with the second nacelle as well, in a sort of a mutually supporting network. So why is this a good idea? So I think this is all to do with kind of other aspects of Gene Roddenberry's design philosophy for starships, and that is where the position of the nacelles. You have the nacelles generally wide of the ship, and part of the argument is radiation and all of that, as well as it creating the warp field. Personally, another one I've always held to be so is it affects warp field geometry. Is the relative to where the warp field is generated. So from where the warp field is generated, you effectively have more control. And if you have effectively kind of 3 balanced warp fields, or kind of, because a warp field in and of itself is actually born of the overlap of 2 fields anyway. So a warp field for a twin nacelle ship is born of the overlap between the 2 nacelles, the energy field created by that. The actual individual fields aren't themselves warp fields. They're only warp fields when they overlap around the ship, and that is how you create a warp field. So adding a third one to that I don't see as being a problem, permitted that it kind of fits into that network and it's not this unstable element. So anyway, what is the part of the advantage or help for that? Well, it gives you more control. It gives you an extra thing. So this is another thing that I've actually seen a couple of people say, that you can't steer at warp. Now, as far as I was always concerned, that's not the case. You can steer a warp. That's, again, part of the reason you have 2 nacelles. It's like tank steering. So basically, you weaken the warp field on one side and strengthen it on the other, and that leads the ship to turn at warp. And having a third nacelle really helps improve that warp speed maneuverability. You've got a kind of a leading edge and a more kind of loose hinging point. You can kind of hinge around on one point more easily, and sort of more rapidly turn at warp speeds. So I think in terms of warp speed maneuverability, that makes sense. So this is the Wasp. So after looking at the Wasp, that's kind of what it should do. Now looking at the Niagara, does it, as an actual canon example, so nearly and not quite. First thing to mention, is the Niagara technically a kit bash? It's using Galaxy class engines and Ambassador class hull, so yes. It's the orientation of the nacelles. They're roughly in the right place, but with what you'd actually have would be them slightly further out, slightly angled, so that they're all kind of making a proper triangle, whereas actually what you have with the Niagara is a conventional layout on top and then a third on the bottom. It's merely by happenstance that it is in line just about with the other 2 warp engines. But yeah, if you wanted to do it properly, there would be some adjustments made. You would increase the distance from the hull, you would change the angle of the nacelles, and you would make sure they're all in good equal line of sight of one another. That's the other thing. You want to have the distance equal, so that you don't have kind of one field overriding the other 2. So I think as long as you have that kind of that reason to it, I think that you can have 3 nacelle designs. There's just got to be reason. It's got to make sense. You can't just, because, well, effectively what you've got with the Galaxy Dreadnought is a nacelle pylon getting in the way of the other 2 nacelles. So actually, you still only end up with 2 warp fields because you've only got 1 nacelle in light. Well, you've only got 2 nacelles in sight of each other anyway. The 2 on either side can't actually see each other properly because there's a dirty great pylon in the middle. So they're not actually able to generate a warp field. So as a result, it's kind of pointless. I mean, that just summarizes the Galaxy X, frankly. What are the potential benefits of this? Like I say, I think increased warp speed maneuverability. I think you're distributing the work across 3 engines instead of 2. I think also there's something to be said for warp field integrity. With a twin nacelle design, it's very simple, it's very effective, but there's 1 warp field, and if you target your weapons on it and try to disrupt just one of those engines, you can bring that ship out of warp. So if you have a 3rd nacelle, you've actually got another pair, although you're only going to go in one direction of warp. Actually, a 3rd nacelle doesn't help it that much. Really, if you want to stay in warp for longer, you need a quad nacelle design. So I suppose that then raises the question, okay, well, you've got, mono nacelle, twin nacelle, tri-nacelle, and quad nacelle. What's to stop you from going up from that? And I think that you'd have to say there's a logical minimalism to all of this. Once you get up beyond quad nacelle, you're kind of just doing the same thing, just with more components and more parts. Everything beforehand is doing something different. A mono nacelle is very different to a twin nacelle design, as is a tri-nacelle design, as is a quad nacelle design. I think they all can fit in, and then that is the cutoff. I don't think adding a 5th nacelle adds anything. But so I would say if you're going to design a 3 nacelle ship, you need to do that from the get-go. You cannot just have a design of ship and just say, I'll just stick another nacelle on. It doesn't work, and you're not going to have any of the benefits of a 3rd nacelle. I mean, the other thing with the Trek Yard's Dreadnought is that the nacelle is not even in line. It's on top of the saucer section, so it's way forward. It's not. You can't. Again, that's one of the things. The nacelles should all be aligned with one another. You can't just have one at the very front and one at the very back. That doesn't. That again, you're not really making sense. So I think, permitted that it makes sense and permitted that the design is built around its purpose, as long as the form follows function, I think a tri-nacelle design is perfectly acceptable in Star Trek. I think they look very good. Especially, like I say, with that Wasp class, it's a lovely design. I can imagine it just spinning through space like a bullet. Really cool. But, those are just my thoughts. What are your guys? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.